the 28th of May, 2022. Thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel. In addition, like my official YouTube videos, as well as share the link to my official YouTube videos. If you're going to leave a comment, make sure to have etiquette and respect, and go to my website, www.susanmuling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. So, after listening and processing to a few different reports regarding Fox News in conjunction to CNN about the particulars regarding the Uvalde, Texas situation, and more in reference to what Tucker Carlson had brought up, as well as what Greg Gutfeld brought up, though there are certain other commentaries regarding CNN and MSNBC that are valid points. The reality in reference to the mental health situation, which I've brought up repeatedly before, in regards of what occurred in reference to my daughter, which giving that acknowledgement as to the biases thereof, though also acknowledging the situations because of the situations to my biological mother and my biological father as to my childhood and my teenage years. So in comparison to the situations with my daughter, where I had been truthful and had encouraged her to tell the truth, the situations regarding, despite the fact my biological mother was a deacon at Old Tenet Presbyterian Church, and despite the fact that my biological father was a trustee at Old Tenet Presbyterian Church, the two of them had certain choices that they had made. So in reference to the cellar underneath Old Tenet Presbyterian Church, as to the situations regarding the warnings that I had given, as well as the references of circumstances where my biological mother had encouraged me as a child, which I had stopped. However, I also dealt with the repercussions of not going forward with that. So my biological mother, we would go to the grocery store, whether it was Pathmark or A&P or ShopRite, and there's the Eminem song in regards to certain factors as to what I dealt with, and certain references regarding my own biological mother to certain similarities. And so my biological mother would actually encourage me to, when she would see one of those signs as to if there was a cleanup in the aisle or something like that, so there are those who know how certain references go as to frivolous lawsuits. And so my biological mother would be one of those people who would see an area that had a large amount of water on the floor. And if the sign was not in a specific way, she would encourage me, although I shouldn't say encourage, as to what I would deal with if I didn't. And so those particular factors to go run as fast as I could and then stop once I got to the sign. As a child in not even elementary school for certain references, though also in regards of in elementary school, anybody who knows those particular slick areas on the floor as to that situation, and then my biological mother would do as she did. And at first it was similar to what my ex-sister-in-law did regarding Home Depot. So Home Depot and Lowe's, my ex-sister-in-law, Susie Marie Nichols Lopez at the time, though she remarried with the last name of Sweeney or Sweetie, something along those sound as far as that's concerned, she would purchase knowingly stolen merchandise from Home Depot. I didn't learn about this until the time frame I did, and then again, I wasn't willing to be a part of that, and then, the Fort Worth Zoo occurred. However, as a hypothetical, nonetheless, not only that, though, also in regards of the Corona beer. Nonetheless, as to that particular situation, she would purposefully, knowingly purchase hot items to then have the returns so that way to get the store credit. My biological mother would do that so that way the groceries, as far as that was concerned, because that's how it was done similarly in the state of New Jersey in the 1980s and 1990s, for those who would know. And so while I didn't want to be a part of that, didn't see any benefit to that, and took a stand against that, well, because I chose to take a stand against that, well, then there's fifth grade. For those hypothetical references, among a few other situations, those who have met my biological mother and or my biological father and or my biological sister and or my ex-in-laws, possibly there are certain situations that can be reviewed as to that factor. So in reference to my daughter's situation, as far as the Fort Worth Zoo, because how dare I teach my daughter to be independent, and how dare I teach my son to have manners as well as my daughter to have manners. How dare I teach my son and my daughter to be truthful. How dare I teach my son and my daughter to be resilient. How dare I teach my son and my daughter to think for themselves. How dare I teach my son and my daughter to have ethics and morals. How dare I teach my son and my daughter to do the best as possible while also being capable to be independent in comparison to what I dealt with as a child and a teenager. Because again, I was invited to attend Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment. And each and every attempt that I had made in the beginning to get away from my biological mother and my biological father and my biological sister because of their choices that I personally disagreed with, as well as the fact that I had the right to my own life in comparison to their opinions, I wasn't willing to partake in what they were a part of because I saw where that was going. And so I wasn't willing to be a part of that. And due to their viewpoints, there is the reference to the second portion of Cat's Eye that some could take in consideration as to my childhood, as well as my teenage years and my biological adult years as to that hypothetical in those references. That's not humanity. That's depravity. Huge difference. Just because human beings had made those choices, that is not humanity. Just for clarifications. Humanity has to do with compassion. Humanity has to do with the preference of actual life. Humanity has to do with genuine progress towards betterment. Humanity has to do with actual genuine care and concern. Depravity doesn't care about that. Depravity looks for any way as an excuse in comparison to actual ways to fix and repair in the genuine correct ways. So I know that I am not the only person who has dealt with a biological mother and or biological father who has been in that capacity. One particular reference I can give due to the lyrics of certain songs would be as I Eminem, also known as apparently Marshall Mathers. So those particular factors as to those types of situations, the irony of how I could see a lot of the lyrics as to Eminem when he first came out in the year 2000 on the radio, when I woke up from my coma after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. When I was in medical hold unit, I would actually fight, not physically fight, I would argue to listen to Eminem because I could hear in his lyrics, with and without Dr. Dre as far as lyrics are concerned, I could hear how much more he had. I could hear that fire within him. And so in that particular reference, the irony about some of his lyrics as to certain similarities. Not the exact same, obviously. Detroit, Michigan is a different area than New Jersey in the United States of America. And yet there are certain connecting portions of. I can't remember where Dr. Dre is from, though I know I had listened to some of his earlier stuff in the mid to late 1980s and early 1990s. That has to do with where I was born and raised. Nonetheless, those situations as to that type is not considered parenting. Even Dyfus had a problem with Mike and Anna. The situations they dealt with, though, had to do with every time Mike and Anna would say, oh, well, we're a deacon and a trustee of Old Tenet Presbyterian Church. What could ever go wrong with that? And so my biological father would tell people that he was a trustee and how you should trust me in that reference and those particular situations. And while, yes, his work regarding watches and jewelry, there's no denying. However, those factors as to certain situations regarding the background in conjunction with my biological mother. Now, my biological father, at the minimum, had acknowledged that there wasn't a manual on how to raise children. And yet, there are the what to expect when you're expecting, what to expect in these regards, and those particular references for certain books, for manuals. However, there's also my first two books, Finding a Silver Lining and Finding the Silver Lining, which you can find in my book section as to the links to purchase through Amazon regarding my website, www.susanmeling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. Now, I dealt with that throughout my childhood. There were multiple locations and multiple times in reference to Pathmark and ShopRite and A&P as far as those areas, as to those situations. I don't know if there's any pop culture references as to those situations, because not only that, then they'd purposefully pick up certain types of canned goods and those references as to, because of those situations, as to what I dealt with as a child. I saw that again, as I brought up regarding my ex-sister-in-law, as well as my ex-mother-in-law, because the majority of stuff, if you take a look at the front yard, she wouldn't have been capable to have that fence put up. She wouldn't have had the bricks in the front of the house if it wasn't for that, regarding Susie, my ex-sister-in-law, and her going through that route. That's just how those areas were built up in comparison. And so I had brought it forward. People that I knew had said that wasn't that big of a deal, and yet I knew that that impacted the price of everything for those who actually paid without that capacity up. And so those situations as to the patterns of behavior would be that length of time. So my biological mother and biological father did that early on. And the constant amount of lies that they had told about me was constant. Anything that disagreed with them, they did whatever they could, because they felt that I should do what they wanted in comparison to what I knew and understood and comprehended was best. And so I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised in regards to, after publishing my first few books and or after how I wound up in Washington State, which would have to do with that, in conjunction to before then, as to why the so-called excuse as to moving to the state of Texas, and or the aspects as to the time frame of the updates regarding my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmeling.com, the same as www.ladydorybell.com. And individuals who would be truthful in the New Jersey state area or during the time frame of having been there, wherever they might be now, compared to the reference point of Illinois, same aspects, and or the state of Texas with the hypotheticals as to Washington State and the locations during my Medal of Honor art project trips. And so those hypothetical similarities to Excalibur Fair and those false accusations that were proven in those references, the aspects of my biological mother and biological father, biological sisters situations regarding the references to the Uvalde, Texas aspect. So would there be the situations regarding any similarities to my biological mother and or my biological father and or my biological sister and or my ex-in-laws through the proverbial metaphorical map in those regards, not just in reference to the social media though, in conjunction to the social media. Then on top of that, with my prior official YouTube video channel videos, again, make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel, as well as share my official YouTube channel video links and go to my website, www.susanmuling.com. Which, for clarifications, in Washington State, when I was at Club Sapphire volunteering, I knew about my own website. That's something other people could have asked me about. I don't do hinting. That's not something I am a fan of. If you do hinting or tiptoeing around situations in comparison to having etiquette and respect, while additionally being straightforward, I don't do that. I'm not that type of a person. So you either ask me honestly with etiquette and respect, or your hinting is whatever you're hinting in this hypothetical, and we'll talk about whatever you're hinting in comparison to what you're hinting at. As that hypothetical, if I am accurate in those references. So if there's any hypothetical situations regarding those types, and there'd probably be some people from the state of Texas, hypothetically, and or New Jersey and or Illinois, who may have just said, well, just be straightforward and ask if I'm accurate regarding the modern day book, and she'll probably just be truthful, such as when the name Dory was brought up and just straightforward and to the point, which then, at what level of delusion do you have to be in certain references of that similarity to what I dealt with in 2003 and 2004 regarding my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister that had no legal right and no legal authority to test the after effects of my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000 and the medical aspects as to the medication board reviews, which in turn leads me to this next factor, which the prescription medications that I have brought up. So if you haven't read the side effects, you should think about that. You can find what the list of side effects are. So regarding headache medication, such as Maxalt and Imitrex, literally some of the side effects for anti-headache medication is headaches. It's actually one of the side effects. Another side effect to migraine medication is headaches and or migraines. So in regards of the mental health situation and the obvious length of time of those particular prescriptions in the late 1980s into the 1990s regarding a lot of the yuppie parents that didn't want to be parents but wanted to have the status of having children, so that way the way they viewed it was in regards of their employment as to the status in comparison to actually being parents. Those who know what the perceptions were during the 1980s into the 1990s, you pretty much have that viewpoint. And so similarly, I had actually called this, I had told a few people, and this includes my ex-sister-in-law, but also my ex-brother-in-law and his second wife in Oklahoma. I had told them that when my ex-sister-in-law, Susie Marie Nichols Lopez at that time, realized that her income would decrease the moment her children started getting to a certain age, she would look at doing what she could to get knocked up again, so that way she could do that in comparison to having employment. I don't know how long the second marriage as to my ex-sister-in-law has been, and I don't know at what point in time she had the 2 children. I'll just leave that for those to review that timeline. So in that comparison as to those hypotheticals regarding viewpoints thereof. And so in the references to mental health medications, to the comparisons of headaches and migraines, well, if headache and migraine medications have the side effects of a possibility of headaches and or migraines, then what would the common sense approach be to antidepressants? The answer for this lecture would be it would cause anger swings as well as depression as a side effect. So then there's the other side effects aside from that, that in the 1980s into the 1990s might not have been taken into consideration, such as the fertility issues regarding what the chemical compounds may have done to the human body. And that's a known factor as to the DNA strands being impacted by certain types of prescriptions. And in my opinion, I wouldn't be surprised if in regards of Uvalde, certain combinations of, though if there were certain situations as to prescriptions, if instead of utilizing prescriptions to try to mask the situation in comparison to dealing with the situation. So I'll give an example. In the year of 2012, I had seen Dr. Carey several times over in the Selma area of Texas. And in this reality of having had him as a doctor multiple times before, similar to other situations, I had a multitude of individuals who tried to claim their opinion was that if I had more prescriptions, that I'd be in a better mood. I had informed Dr. Carey the reality is dealing with the actual problems. I didn't believe that the prescriptions were actually being helpful. I had the sensation, before reading the side effects, by the way, I had the sensation that I was getting angrier because of the actual medications. That because other people were trying to live in a pretend world compared to what reality is, that the prescriptions were causing more problems than they were actually worth. And I saw that as a problem, not just because of the veteran aspect as to where I had went, though in regards of active duty, National Guard reservists and veterans, including dependents who have gotten medical treatment on a military installation. And while it was viewed differently, as far as not just Dr. Carey in the year 2012, though also different doctors in the years of 2011 and 2010, as well as 2009 and 2008, 2007, 2006, 2005, and 2004, because of certain situations, I didn't believe that the prescriptions that were being as to their attempts to cover up certain things, I didn't believe that they were anything worthwhile. I didn't see anything of any value or worth, which the irony, my biological mother and biological father and biological sister had moved to the state of Texas in the year of 2003. where there was the uptick as to the prescriptions that I didn't see how that was helping my headaches or migraines to give me antidepressants. That's kind of backwards, because what would antidepressants have to do with my headaches and migraines? The answer for this lecture is absolutely nothing. So with their pattern of behavior, just in reference to the time frame of New Jersey, then you add the pattern of behavior to Illinois in conjunction to the pattern of behavior in the state of Texas and or thereafter. As far as where I went, I have repeatedly fought to not have to have anything to do with them or their cohorts because of the facts of knowing the reality. And so while the situations as to the San Antonio pagan community, Excalibur Fair, where my biological mother actually tried to defend the 5 males that jumped out of the trees with weapons in their hands. She actually tried to defend them to me, claiming she didn't understand why I couldn't see the joke, which I dealt with. So anybody who's ever responded a certain way to my biological mother, when she asked me why I couldn't see the joke, I looked at her a little bit more closely. I kind of leaned in and I was like, I see that very clearly. And so, you know, anybody who has ever had a certain type of situation regarding Anna, well, you know what happened as far as the amount of tears and crying and all that stuff. And then Mike came over my house in San Antonio to, you know, talk with me, because if I wasn't so mean, even though I explained the situations, my own I mean, there is the fact of 2005. So, you know, as far as the backyard. And then there's my biological sister regarding how, to this day, in the year of 2022, from the time frame of 2003, I still don't understand how my biological sister actually got away with wrongfully blaming me because she felt lonely because I gave a hug. Not anything more, that's not a symbolic aspect, a literal, you know, just like this. That was it. She felt lonely because she saw me give a hug. And that was her claim as to what transpired regarding the threesome at Mike and Anna's house before they moved fully to San Antonio. I don't understand to this day how I could be blamed for that at all. However, you know, I wasn't wearing this. I was wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt. So, in comparison, and my hair was my natural hair color, and I had it in a ponytail. That was it. Nothing major, just that in comparison. So, that. And so I dealt with that, you know, round table-ish discussion where after they had fully moved to Texas from Illinois, I dealt with being accused of causing her to feel lonely by giving a hug. That was it. Nothing more. Wasn't any hanky-panky or anything. Just a hug. And so dealt with my biological mother and my biological father going on and on and on and on and on about how if I didn't have the nerve to give a hug to my then husband, now dead ex-husband, in front of my biological sister, she wouldn't have felt the need to have a threesome in their house before they moved in. In my opinion, then in the year of 2003, as well as now in the year of 2022, that's no different than those situations regarding the state of New Jersey, where if somebody broke in and they slipped on a rug and they were gonna whatever, those types. That's the similar viewpoint for a metaphor, in my opinion. So that's my biological mother that's involved with that, and biological father and biological sister and all these other people that I had known throughout the years, their opinions as to their choices and however their lack of common sense was. However, so when you take in consideration as to those medication situations, which because I had bounced back without any repercussions, and my biological mother was upset regarding several situations. Then there was 5th grade, remember that? And so where I should have been in an actual hospital, as per the pediatrician's recommendation, my biological mother tried to claim certain aspects which were not in line with the prior patterns of behavior at all, whatsoever. So I had gotten my immunizations over the years. I had various prescriptions regarding if I had certain things. And obviously, I received prescriptions regarding the in-home health care that occurred. However, you can't claim certain things as far as the deacon and trustee situation. You don't get to pick and choose. You're either, it's just the facts. And so being the sponsor and my dead ex-husband not having any legal right, nor having any legal authority regarding the aspects of myself, because of me being the one and only sponsor, my biological mother, biological father, biological sister, and ex-in-laws legally have had no right and no authority to get involved in any capacity of. And so while they may have thought that they did, legally they did not. And so any of their hypothetical lies to their patterns of behavior over the decades is the truth. Because when you take a look at how I took a stand in reference to the cellar, or what some would consider a basement, at Old Tenet Presbyterian Church, and those particular factors, even Pastor McKenzie said the most fluffified, politically correct aspect of my biological mother and biological father being strict with me. He didn't say that about my biological sister. He said that about me. So there is that factor to pay attention to as well. Then you have the situations regarding Baptist Camp Lebanon, and those situations in conjunction because of the facts. And so while I wouldn't know about anything other than the court case and how that went, that's all I would know about, in comparison to whatever aspects of that my biological mother and or my biological father would have made the choice to in comparison. That's another problem in those references to mental health awareness and mental health reform, because that's the facts. So those particular situations where in those hypotheticals to certain similarities, that lets you know quite a bit more if there's any connected portions of. So while they may have tried to utilize certain aspects of, it's the actions in conjunction to the words as to the proof of intention, as to the length of time. And so in regards of if my biological mother finally accepted and told people she didn't ever want me as a child, that's additional proof regarding what I dealt with from the time frame of my childhood into my teenage years and my biological adult years, which extends to my son and my daughter. And anybody that I personally had gotten along with, in person, face to face, in person especially. Whether acquaintance or friendship or chosen family or dating relationship type of what have you, because of those factors. And so when you take in consideration my daughter had been in mental health institutions because of what occurred in reference to the Fort Worth Zoo, after what occurred in reference to McCoy Elementary School regarding the Texas Education Agency as far as the ARD and IEP, or the Individual Education Plan, and those factors, that wasn't a right that she had, nor authority. There was no allowance regarding that, because I wouldn't ever allow that. Again, I purposefully moved out of the city of San Antonio after having repeatedly pushed them away to protect my son and my daughter and myself, because I remembered my childhood. I remembered my teenage years, while other people were gullible enough to believe in the references of, in those hypotheticals, especially with the time frame of the updates to my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmealing.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com. Those particular factors as to what I put in writing in reference to finding a silver lining most specifically, that's what I discussed with people in various areas. So I had been capable to bring forward some of the documentation when I was still the legal guardian while being mom, as to the specific years as to finding a silver lining. In conjunction to the factual situations I had discussed, albeit monikers, in finding the silver lining. And so, unlike the updates regarding my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, through my website, www.susanmealing.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com, those situations which I had given the knowledge that there was a background, the situations in person, face to face in person, as to the hypotheticals that would be proven in reference to the modern day book, as to my book section on my website, www.susanmealing.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com, would be capable to give further clarifications and verifications as to the differences, as to the proof. Because if I had acknowledged without the clarifications as to the hypotheticals of biases emotional factors, so on and so forth, and then the realization as to the numerical portion, because before 2019, I didn't look into the numerical factor, with the exception of the birth of my son and my daughter. That's the only time I had given the reference to the numerical aspects. Otherwise, the updates to my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, on my website, www.susanmulane.com, also known as www.ladydorybell.com, is exactly that. Updates. Pay attention to the years. Pay attention to the time frame. So while I had acknowledged the subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain, and the length of time, the MRIs, so on and so forth, the only numerical portions I personally, in person, face-to-face, in person, went over had to do with the year of 2001, the year of 2002, and obviously the year of 2000. Otherwise, not until the updates did I bring up the time frames because of the aspects to the updates. So while other people's opinions might be as whatever their opinions might be, the proof as to the situations regarding the actual intentions have been capable, hypothetically, to be brought forward in full truth, in a more clear and concise way. So in regards of the known factor as to the AT&T company being the only company that had the iPhone, whereas Verizon, AT&T, when it created T-Mobile, and Sprint have had whichever types of phones, from Blackberries to Androids and so on and so forth, AT&T for a very long time was the only ones with iPhones, iPods, and iMacs as far as that was concerned, or Apple Macs. So as that time went onward to those merging aspects, to the coding that would be embedded to those particular factors, the updates regarding my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, through my website, www.susanmulane.com. And so while those realities as to the 10 Commandments, because the only way you can have constitutional rights is in the 10 Commandments. That's a fact, because of all the other laws. It's not even bureaucracy, it's just the laws. So, in those references, while you can refer to what prescriptions had he been on, when you take in consideration, I was on Maxalt and Imitrex, Depakote, and quite a few others in the year of 2000. When I woke up from my coma, when I was stationed in medical hold unit at Fort Sam Houston before it became Warrior Transition Unit, the situations of reality are exactly that. So it wasn't until 2013 that I had actually started reading some of the side effects. And the reality of or anti-headache medication causing headaches as a side effect, that's a problem. Migraine or anti-migraine medication causing headaches and or migraines is a problem. That's not medication. That's not assistive. That doesn't do anything. Then there's the factors. In the year of 2009, an individual that I knew had recommended I go to a chiropractor. And when that chiropractor had looked at my bone structure, had asked what medications I had been on, and I just brought my stuff in for him to look at. When he looked at it, he had brought up how some of them had bone depleting factors and what I would need to do to better assist myself because of those prescriptions. He also went into the clarifications as to what certain organs dealt with because of those types of prescriptions, which in turn, regarding the behavioral medication, what would that translate to in reference to reproduction as to creating life? So I didn't grow up being on prescriptions. There's not any point in time except for when I was sick. That's it. Otherwise, that was all that occurred. So unless I needed a boost here and there, such as vitamins or what have you, that's pretty much what I did for myself as to preventative maintenance for my best interests. And so in the year of 2013 is when I realized, okay, MMJ might actually be better in comparison to the prescriptions. Because how many people have had issues? I actually was pulled over in the Irving area, and it had to do with the prescriptions at the time in comparison, as I had explained to that officer. Now granted, that's after the Fort Worth Zoo, after the temper tantrum regarding Zach Miller in reference to Exit 200 and the Starbucks situation, as well as that abomination of a wedding regarding my biological sister and that particular situation. However, unlike my biological sister, I wasn't on prescriptions in those references. I didn't ever have any psychiatric medication prescribed to me, unlike my biological sister at a much younger age. So that's additionally something to take into consideration, because it wasn't until after waking up from my coma, from my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, as to those factors. And so that's something that, what would the antidepressants cause? Because what if people don't read the side effects and or aren't told about them, and the suicide rate because of those situations? So reading the side effects are important as to those factors. Because if these prescriptions as to these factors, similarly to the headache and migraine situation, to the antidepressant, anti-PTSD, anti-anger or whatever, then is the side effects in those particular regards? And if so, that is a discussion that needs to be brought forward. Because obviously that's important, especially in regards of, since the discussions as to other videos as to interplanetary travel and space travel, space stations, so on and so forth, that's important to take into consideration. So just bringing that forward for this particular official YouTube video of mine. Make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel, like my official YouTube videos, share the links to my official YouTube videos, and if you're going to leave a comment, make sure to have etiquette and respect. And go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com, which is the same as www.ladydoribell.com. And as I have put in my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, if you are going to refer to my work as far as, make sure to give the correct full link, as I have given that reference in the time frame of 2020, if I recall the time frame correctly, as to the correct aspect for the full capability to actually read. So that way, in comparison, yes, you can comment as to a snippet, though you still have to put the entire link, so that way the individual can make an informed decision for themselves, because that's how you assist with genuine truth in comparison. That's important. So, in my opinion, those antidepressants just try to mask the situation in comparison to actually dealing with it. I wouldn't be surprised if there were certain other side effects that needed to be looked into. I had a neighbor, which my now dead ex-husband had purchased jewelry for, and it was as it was regarding that. Anyway, that yellow, gold, and ruby with diamonds earring and necklace set, if I remember correctly. She had explained she had been on a chemical cocktail. And I asked what she meant by that. And she had said that, and it was irony because she was a vegan or a vegetarian. So it didn't make sense to me how she could be a vegan vegetarian but yet be willing to take as many prescriptions to the level of. However, she had explained that she considered it as a chemical cocktail because of all of these prescriptions. And it made absolutely no sense. Now, conversely, in the year of 2008, when I went up the chain of command and got to Major General Gilman's office, I brought up my concern in reference to the military guys that were in Warrior Transition Unit, though also in reference to the individuals who were overseas and coming back stateside, as well as others, because I know that there's certain factors to being capable to actually deal with that because of those factors. Not in the fluffified, oh, let's do this and, no, those guys don't do well with that, which is the irony. They do, so, if you want to do the, fluffy, in comparison to guys who just need it straight up, because they're not the types, especially law enforcement in regards of higher law enforcement, though yes, the local and state law enforcement, but especially military guys with certain backgrounds. You don't have to be a ... guy. You could just have a certain background as to your life, and you'd prefer, in my opinion, the straightforward and to the point in comparison to the fluffified garbage. Because that fluffified garbage takes so much more effort to fluffify than it does to just tell the truth and deal with the truth. And I can give the reference as to Irving 2011. I can give the reference as to the Vandenberg scuba dive as that reference. I can give the reference as to the Boca scuba dive. I can give the reference to the Gulf of Mexico scuba dives. I can also give the references to the Lake Travis scuba dives and a few others. I can also give the reference as to out to the Atlantic area of the ocean. I can also give the references to certain factors as to the forest area. It has taken me far more effort to not talk about it because of what I dealt with than it has to, more so now it's difficult for me to do the videos. Even including my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, because of what I've dealt with. And so, not just in regards of what I've dealt with in those particular situations and the aftermath of, but especially that after portion in time. So while, okay, my childhood and my teenage years, whatever in those capacities, my scuba diving, no. That's my work. And so instantly remembering my childhood My teenage years, as far as the oceanic aspects, who was I going to speak with in person, face to face in person about that? I made attempts regarding the scuba diving areas even in the year of 2019. The choices were as the choices were instead. That's the facts. So, in reference to 2011, as I've explained more so regarding my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, there was no reason for me to ever believe that anybody would actually believe me and want to speak with me about it because of what I had already dealt with. So without certain aspects as to mandatory situations, I didn't see any reason for me to go into any of the details of. Because if there's not that truth starting off, then why should I bother? I already grew up with that. That doesn't assist anything, that doesn't do anything positive, that doesn't bring forward any positive changes. So if that's not brought forward in an honest way, I just don't have that need. It's been more difficult for me, which I would guesstimate ... type of guys who have done certain types of missions. That's probably similar in certain references as to those particular factors. However, it's what I dealt with already. So in regards of the Uvalde shooter being in an area outside of the city limits of San Antonio, Texas, though very close by, which is also known as Military City, USA, the situations to take into the review as to not just the culminations of, though the facts of if there were prescriptions. Because what would it be regarding MK Ultra as to what would be more known to others, and the situations as to the video games in the 1980s and 1990s news reports to consider. So I knew a mom in the time frame when I was volunteering at 9 Lives Books, and her son had epileptic seizures since he was, I think she said, 4 or 5 years old. And he was, I think, 17 or 18 years old at the time. So this was about 2006 or 2007. And she had discussed how he was getting an implant behind his ears that would do something not necessarily to the equivalent of Neuralink, though maybe a beginning phase too. And I had given her warnings that I didn't have a good feeling or a good sensation as to the particular description she had given me. And I was afraid that it would, if he had gotten near a certain area, that it would cause a problem to his brain. And I was afraid, so I had made this I had given this as a metaphor. So I didn't realize what I had purchased was not considered a taser. I didn't realize the differences. I thought they were all the same. And my mistake is a little handheld black piece of equipment in comparison to what I recently saw in a video. It wasn't in the shape of any type of firearm. It was just a little rectangle, and it had 2 pieces of metal on each side, and you pushed a button and there was the electric blue current and the sound, and then it also had an alarm that actually sounded like a car alarm, but it had a bracelet that had a pin that if inside of the area the usage of to protect and defend was possible, and if it was removed because of the bracelet, then it wouldn't be capable to be used regarding the situation. And I had went to All Stars in San Antonio one evening, and a female that I had recognized, I had spoken with her, and out of just nowhere, I reached into my purse and I handed it to her and I showed her how to use it. And she asked me why I was doing that, and I said, I have this weird sensation that you need it. I don't know what it is, don't know why. Whatever it is, if I'm inaccurate, fine. But if I'm accurate, you have this. Fast forward a couple of months, and I went back to All Stars with a group of people, and as checking in with the house mom to go and sit in the chairs and enjoy, I got tackled. And I landed on the floor because I wasn't expecting. It was a big hug. That's what it was. And I had to remain calm. And so when I realized it was who it was like, oh, hi. What's going on? Other than the fact that I'm laying on All Stars carpeted floor. So can I get up right about now? I'd really appreciate that. That'd be great. Just saying. I'm not saying anything per se. I'm just gonna leave it at that. So I was helped to stand up, and it was, yeah, so let's not do that again and say we didn't, okay? That, I can make a joke about cleaning the shower in comparison. You can have a picnic after I clean that shower. Don't recommend it, but you could have a picnic on the floor when I was done cleaning. Nonetheless. And I know there were complaints about the smell of bleach and cleanliness. And so, because that's what bleach is clean. Nonetheless, just gonna leave that at that. So it was explained to me that she was capable to protect and defend herself. And it was like, oh, well, that's good. Well, having realized that it's not the same as a taser, I suppose, because it was just a little doohickey mabob that was like maybe 5 inches tall, about 2.5 inches wide by maybe an inch thick. Well, I had explained to the mom, and I had said, when I read the instructions, it said that people who have pacemakers, which I wouldn't care. I'm not gonna be in the middle of, excuse me, do you have a pacemaker? Is the equivalent of stress card? No. If I have to, I will. And then it said, count to 10. Don't go past 10 seconds. Yeah, no. If I have to defend myself, I'm not counting to 10. I'm gonna count, I won't count until after you stop. No. If I have to defend myself, no. Especially if it's unprovoked and all that. I have the right to protect and defend myself. I'm not gonna be all one Mrs. Yeah, actually, I would do the 1.1 Mrs. So no, I'm not gonna, no. I'm going to protect and defend myself if I have to. And if that translates to, Well, that's what that translates to, because you started it, and that's how that. I mean, especially after Excalibur is when this essentially was a situation, and it was like, yeah, no, 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 no. No, 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 no. I found another one on eBay later on. My first one was compared to no, 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 no. So it worked out. I'm glad that she was capable to be safe, and all that, and there were other situations that were capable to be taken care of in a better way and protected in that regard. So that is as it is. Nonetheless, there are those situations which the truth is the truth. So when other people don't take in consideration the facts, well, the choices that are made are the choices that are made. And so the capability to explain is important. That's the only way to genuinely get to healing. That's just the facts as to the reality. And so situations as to the overall factors, I can't remember what group of people that I had attended that evening with. I can't remember at all. Nonetheless, I think ironically, I think it had to do with the pagan community, if I remember correctly, probably Celtic cowboy. I think it actually might have been Celtic cowboy, actually. As far as that's concerned, John Video, as far as those factors. And so, nonetheless, that went the way it did. But in regards of Uvalde, those situations where the explanation sometimes needs to really be taken into consideration. And so the way certain types make their choices, my biological sister did that. I watched others do that. I do what I can to not do that. I don't want to give that false impression as far as that's concerned. If I don't have a discussion in person, face to face in person, that's just the way that's going to go. I will take care of all sorts of other stuff, and if the choices are to wish that another factor is going to be a better option, that individual is going to learn the hard way. Because I'm very particular, as in a multitude of ways. Because especially regarding social media and those factors, the knowledge as to my biological mother, biological father, biological sister, and ex-in-laws being needless problems, I have a mandatory requirement where in those references, that is an in-person, face-to-face in-person, that is to be done in genuine truth. That is a mandatory as far as etiquette and respect, because it's mandatory. It's not an option, as the reference to Sapphire can give in that regard, because of picking up on certain things. There was an individual who had said, yeah, it's just like clockwork when she goes for a walk. Never mind the fact of the attention to security detail as far as other situations. And then my Medal of Honor art project trips and the hypotheticals regarding that in reference to Club Sapphire. When you stir up needless drama that way, and in comparison to speaking with the one and only to speak with about certain things, those particular factors, because, that's the reality as to having to discuss that with me and only with me. There's no one else to discuss that with, only with me. Because of my website, my work, my stuff. Period and end of story. Nobody has the right to utilize that without my permission regarding publicizing, especially at Club Sapphire or supposed to be consenting adult lifestyle events, most specifically. Then there's my Medal of Honor art project trips. And, you know, maybe hypothetically, energetically, I picked up on a few problems that occurred needlessly because, you know, maybe it's not considered as something that would be wanted unless it's done through my standards because I'm the one doing the work. And so hypothetically, the modern day book would be quite clear as to those situations. And then where is the mental health disorder on those people to think that that would ever be considered acceptable? Because why would you ever go and stir up needless drama that way and ever think that that would be a good idea? I mean, unless all you cared about was anything except what was actually important, and that hypothetical. And so, you know, those types of situations regarding those types of individuals, such as my biological mother, biological father, biological sister, the abomination of a marriage to the Miller situation, as well as my ex-in-laws. Because again, there's only one person to speak with in all of those references. So when you take in consideration mental health situations, so you only have one person to speak with regarding. You have the other circumstances as two other situations, but there are those factors to take in consideration as well. So utilizing the metaphors as to the symbolic references to the Uvalde, Texas situation, when you have needless drama stirred up by certain types of people, as well as the situations as to the side effects of prescription medication, what is important to the actual truthful evaluation. I will leave this particular official YouTube video of mine lecture for you to ponder those particular thoughts that might find a better fixing to repair correctly the situations for betterment in comparison to certain types of needless problems. I appreciate your time. Please do share the link to my official YouTube channel as far as my official YouTube videos. If you're going to leave a comment, make sure to have etiquette and respect. And go to my website, www.susanmealing.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. Today is the 28th of May, 2022. 28 May 2022. Today is Saturday.